What's up everyone and welcome to another YouTube video. As y'all could see in the last two videos, the classical portion of my first round match ended in 1-1, so me and my opponent, Asil Abdujabbar, moved on to a rapid tiebreaker. The rapid of course is quite different from classical. I mean, you have to play faster, and you play at least two games a day, so you have to prepare with white and with black. But fortunately, I'd already done most of my preparation before the tournament. Anyway, so without further ado, let's jump right in and let's see what happened. So my opponent started things off with the move 1d4, which is sort of what I expected before the tournament. I played knight f6, c4, e6, intending to play the Nimzo after knight c3, b4. However, he played the move knight f3, and here I played the move b6, which should have been a slight surprise because I usually play the move d5 here, which is sort of which can lead to a Catalan or a Queen's Gambit. But anyway, the move b6 is called the Queen's Indian defense. My opponent played a3, and I played bishop e7. a3 is not necessarily the main move. The main move here is g3, but he basically always plays a3, which is why I decided to go for this line. I played bishop to b7, he played knight to c3, and I played e5. I'm trying to get my fair share of the center. So he took, I recaptured, and he played queen to c2. So white's intending to play e4. Note that white cannot play e4 right away because I take the pawn on e4. He's just protecting the square. So queen c2. And now I took on c3, he recaptured, and I played c5. Played e4, and I played knight to d7, continuing development. And he played bishop to d3. Now, there's a couple things I can do here, but the move I chose here is, I think, the best, which is the move queen c7. Now, with the move queen c7, I offer a queen trade. And we'll see what happened in the game. In the game, my opponent castled, and I took on d4 and traded the queens. After which, black has quite a comfortable position. It's not so easy for white to keep the queens on the board. I mean, white can move the queen. The problem for white is that ideally he would like to play a move like queen e2, but after queen e2, now I can take, and I have this check queen c3, and black is just winning because I pick up the rook on a1. So white would have to make an awkward move like queen a2 or queen b2 or queen d2 to keep the queens on the board, which is why I played queen c7 in this position. If I play, let's say, bishop e7, castles, and now queen c7, white can play queen e2, and I mean, this is no longer check, so I mean, this doesn't make any sense. White just moves the bishop. So move orders do matter in the opening. So I played queen to c7, he castled, and now I took on d4, he recaptured, and I traded the queens. Here, black has already a very comfortable game. I continue with the move bishop e7. My opponent played bishop e2, and I castled. Rook fe1 and rook a to c8. Just very logical developing moves. I'm also hitting the bishop. He played bishop d3. I played rook f to d8. Now, sometimes there are ideas of knight c5. I mean, just to give an example of how he plays h3, I can consider the move knight c5, because in case he takes, I take the bishop on d3. And black's better because I have the two bishops against a knight and a bishop. So my opponent played rook a to d1, protecting the bishop, and I continued with the move a6, which what I thought was a really good move. My plan is very simple. I want to go b5, and then knight b6, knight to a4, or knight to c4. And suddenly my queenside majority is starting to count, and this pawn on a3 can be a bit weak. So I thought white should maybe play a move like a4, but here the drawback is that I can always play something like bishop e4, rook e2, and a move like a5, fixing the pawn on a4, which I then can start attacking with bishop to c6. So my opponent played knight to d2, I went b5. Here white's already in a lot of trouble. My plan's very simple. I just want to go knight b6 and knight to a4, and it's very difficult for white to keep everything together. This bishop is defending this pawn and defending this pawn. So my opponent played knight to b3, knight b6, knight a5. He's hitting the bishop, so I just go bishop to a8. And once again, what is white going to do? Once I go knight a4, this bishop goes here, he's hanging this pawn. This bishop goes here, he's hanging this pawn. So he's in a lot of trouble already. So he played rook to c1, I played knight a4. He took, I recaptured. He played bishop c1, which is already the losing mistake. He absolutely had to play rook to c1, to which I have a good game. After, let's say I move the rook, right? Let's say I go here. His bishop is hidden. If the bishop moves, I can take this pawn. So he played bishop to c1, but this is already losing. So if you want to try to figure out, you can pause your video. But I played the move rook to c3, hitting the bishop on d3, and I'm hitting this pawn. My opponent played bishop to d1, and I can take this pawn, after which I have these two connected passers. And I mean, normally I would be happy to do that. But I had a better move here, which is the move bishop to d8. And suddenly this knight is trapped. The square is covered by the bishop, the square is covered by the rook. So he played bishop to d2, I took, and he's getting a rook for two minor pieces, but that's obviously a very good trade for me. He played bishop to d3, I played king to f8, just bringing the king closer. Rook c1, king e7. Now obviously I don't want to allow any tricks like this, and suddenly I'm lost. I can consider moves like this, but the problem is that here white can take, and we get an opposite color bishop endgame, which is probably winning for me, because I have two extra pawns, but why bother, right? So that's why I played king to e7. And the problem for white is if he plays a move like f3, defending this pawn, I have a very strong move, bishop to b6. If he takes the knight, I take on d4 with a check, and I pick up the rook, I'm up a piece, and black's winning. So white doesn't have a good way to defend this pawn. So he played king to f1, but now I just take, and I allow his rook in. After bishop to d5, all my pieces are covering all the squares for this rook. Like this bishop is covering these two squares, this bishop is covering, the squares over here. So my opponent played rook to h8, trying to create counterplay. I played h6, rook g8, g6, not giving him any of that. He played rook to h8, I played h5, f3, I hopped back with the knight to d6, h4, and I played bishop b6, going after this pawn. Now I play rook to h7, going for this trick. I just sidestep with the king, gave a check, I went king g7, I play rook to b8, hitting the bishop, but here I played the move bishop to c7. And as we see, the rook is trapped. He cannot go here, because this bishop takes it. Cannot go here, because it also gets taken by the bishop. This bishop not only hits the rook, but it's also covering these squares, and the knight is covering these squares. So once again, this rook is trapped. And so yeah, that won me the first game of the rapid tiebreaker. Yeah, hope you guys liked the video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment. That's always very much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one, where we'll go over the next game. We'll see what happened there. All right, see you guys.